Slowly, I began to regain consciousness. It was like waking up from a deep and heavy sleep, but something was wrong. Usually, you just wake up, your body gradually returns to life, your mind clears up, and your consciousness gently includes you in reality. But now it was not like that. A heavy silence surrounded me, broken only by a constant, uniform beeping. A strange feeling squeezed my chest. Pain. At first it was a dull spasm, then it grew, and I realized that I was lying on the bed, and there was something hard in my mouth. I tried to swallow, but was met with resistance. There was something bothering me in my throat. My hands felt heavy, as if glued to my body, but I tried to lift one and touch my face. Swallowing with effort, I hardly opened one eye, and the world around me slowly began to emerge. There was a white wall in front of me. I was lying in a dimly lit room, where soft light barely penetrated through the thin curtains. The sound of a monitor, ticking and beeping, and the hum of machinery filled the space. Something was ringing nearby, and there was a quiet rustling sound. The pain in my chest was unbearable. Every breath I tried seemed to be accompanied by a red-hot iron piercing my chest. I tried to take a deeper breath, but I felt something getting in the way. The strength left me, and I put my head back on the pillow, desperately trying to understand what was happening. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the doorway, attracting my attention. It was a woman in a white robe. She quickly approached me, her face expressing relief. "Oh, great, Mr. Wilson, you're awake," she said with a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her voice was soft, professional, but there was weariness in it, as if she had done this many times before. "How are you feeling?" she asked, and at that moment her words sounded strange. "Wilson? My name is Wilson." I thought about it, replaying her phrase in my head as if it didn't make sense. "Mr. Wilson. Who is Wilson?" But as her words sank into my mind, memories slowly began to surface. "My name is Ralph Wilson." Yes, she's right. I'm Wilson. But why did it seem so foreign to me? It was as if I was hearing my name for the first time. I tried to answer, but immediately felt that I could not do it. Something hard and unpleasant was sticking out in my throat. I tried to swallow, but it was painful, and the sound came out only hoarse and helpless. The woman noticed my tension. "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson," she said, blushing slightly, realizing that she had asked a question I couldn't answer. "No wonder you look confused. You can't talk to the endotracheal tube. You had a pneumothorax, but now it looks like you'll be on the mend. I called the doctor to see if we can remove the tube." Her words ran through my head. Pneumothorax, doctor. The state was strange, as if I woke up in someone else's body, and this thought pulsated in my mind. Lying on the bed, I tried to comprehend what was happening. I felt physically better than I expected, but the pain in my chest was unbearable. Everything in my chest was burning, as if someone had passed through it with a hot blade. For the first time in my life, I experienced this. Maybe I was having a heart attack. This thought slowly, like a snake, crawled into my consciousness. But why was I thinking about this? How could I even know what it was? And why couldn't I remember anything more specific than my name? I closed my eyes, hoping that the memory would return, that the fog that had shrouded my thoughts would clear. Several minutes passed before a tall, thin man entered the room. He moved quickly, but with restraint, like a man accustomed to emergency situations. His face was concentrated, but at the same time there was a certain lightness in it, characteristic of those who have seen too much and are accustomed to any situation. "Mr. Wilson," he said, cautiously moving closer to my bed. "I'm Dr. Atherton. The nurse will now remove the endotracheal tube. You will be able to talk, but just take your time. Please, just nod or shake your head. Do you know why you are here?" I shook my head, feeling strangely uneasy. There was still a fog in my head, preventing me from getting to the bottom of what had happened. I really had no idea. The doctor nodded, as if expecting such a reaction. "It's okay," he continued, his voice soft and soothing. "After an injury, this is not uncommon. Memory may return gradually. But you were seriously injured. You were shot in the chest, Mr. Wilson. You were brought here in the early hours of Saturday morning, and it is now Wednesday afternoon. As strange as this may sound, you are incredibly lucky. His words echoed in my head. Hurt? Who could have hurt me? And why? I didn't remember any details. Operations? How did this all happen? Fortunately, the ambulance doctors arrived quickly. The doctor continued, noticing my confusion. They brought you here, and after 2 surgeries, we hope you pull through soon. Meanwhile, the nurse deftly removed the tube from my throat. I tried to take a deep breath, and it hurt, but at least I could breathe on my own again. It took several attempts for my vocal cords to make a sound, but I finally managed to say hoarsely, "Thank you." The doctor smiled slightly, nodding encouragingly. "I'll call Detective Harmon so he can talk to you," he added, already preparing to leave the room. I nodded, still trying to understand the meaning of what I heard. All this seemed so distant, as if it was happening not to me, but to someone else. There was that strange silence again, in which the sounds of the equipment in the room seemed deafening. Not even a few minutes had passed when there was a quiet knock on the door of the ward and a man walked inside. It was a man in a shabby suit, looking tired but focused. His movements were calm but confident, like those of a man who was used to stressful situations and did not tolerate unnecessary emotions. "Mr. Wilson," he began, pulling his ID out of his pocket and showing it to me, "I am Detective Roland Harmon." He nodded in my direction. "Feeling well enough to answer a few questions?" My throat still hurt after picking up the phone, but I was able to force myself to answer. "Yes, I think I can speak, but there may be problems with the answers," I said hoarsely, feeling my voice returning to me with every word. Harmon nodded, his face remaining serious. "I see," he said, looking at his notebook. "At 1:47 am Saturday, a 911 call came in," he turned the page, "from your cell phone. The fire department broke down your door because a gunshot was heard on the line. Can you tell who fired the shot?" His words echoed in my head. Who shot? I tried to remember, straining every cell of memory, but all I saw in front of me was emptiness. It seemed like an eternity before I responded. "Detective, what did they find? Where was I? Maybe this will help refresh my memory." The detective frowned slightly, considering my words, and then continued. "You were found on the floor of your bedroom, next to the bed. The bed was rumpled on one side where you were lying. Your wife was lying at the entrance to the bedroom. She had a gun in your hand." "My wife?" I asked, feeling this question echoing in my mind. My gaze became unfocused, as if my consciousness had momentarily gone into another dimension. My wife. Yes, something vague popped up in my memory, like a piece of a forgotten puzzle, but no clear picture. Wife. Who was she? Was she shot too? I asked hoarsely, unable to believe the reality of what was happening. Harmon shook his head, looking at me with a subtle expression of sympathy. "No, Mr. Wilson, she wasn't shot." I took a deep breath, even though it hurt. My brain tried to build a chain of events, but all I could feel was dull anxiety. I looked around the room, as if hoping to find answers in my hands, on the walls, in the sounds of the equipment around me, but everything was blurry and unanswered. "Did she shoot me?" I finally dared to ask, straining my vocal cords. The detective shook his head again, his gaze remaining direct and serious. "No, Mr. Wilson, we are sure it wasn't her." I fell silent again, but panic welled up inside me. Why then did all this happen? And how did I end up getting shot? My brain struggled with these questions, but none of my attempts to remember brought any results. A dull fog still shrouded my consciousness, preventing clarity. Harmon clearly understood my confusion and took a step forward. "Try to focus on that night," he said softly but forcefully. "Did you hear anything? Did you see anything?" I closed my eyes, trying to concentrate. Memories still seemed to me like a mosaic, the pieces of which were scattered in a chaotic disorder. But suddenly, one scene appeared in front of me. The moment is short and blurry, like an old film. I sharply opened my eyes, and something trembled inside me. "Oh no," I said, and a feeling of anxiety washed over me. My head was heavy, my thoughts were confused, but one picture appeared clearly in my memory. Someone was in the house. Harmon immediately became alert, his eyes narrowed, as if he were picking up every detail of my story. I sat up abruptly, despite the pain in my chest immediately echoing like a blow. I was shaking and I tried to calm my breathing, but my body didn't listen. I looked at the detective, almost in despair. My wife was outside. With her lover, I began, as if I was surprised at what I was saying. Images suddenly began to emerge one after another, scenes formed into a whole picture. I accepted that our marriage was over. Divorce. I was alone at home, sleeping, when I heard a rough male voice. He said something like damn, as if he had stumbled upon something. The detective listened attentively. His face did not betray the slightest emotion, although I saw his eyes sparkle at the mention of his lover. The phone was in my hand, I continued, trying to build a chain of events. I was holding it in case she called. When I heard that voice, I immediately dialed 911, put it on speakerphone. At that moment, he entered the room. Just as the operator asked, "This is 911. What is your emergency?" He heard it, and then he fired. My words faded and silence fell in the room. Harmon continued to look at me, but now his face had changed. Wariness and professional interest were visible in it. He asked, leaning forward a little. "Who is he?" I frantically tried to remember the face, but it slipped away like a shadow. Everything was so blurry that I could hardly catch any detail. "Big," I finally managed to say, "wearing a cap," but I couldn't see his face. "White, black, Hispanic?" Harmon asked, his voice becoming a little tenser, but he continued to ask questions evenly. "I don't know." I shook my head, feeling disappointment begin to build inside me. It all happened too quickly. I didn't have time to understand. I think I even looked at the phone to hear the operator go silent, and then a shot rang out. My heart was pounding. Memories replayed in my head again and again, but they remained hazy. All I could remember was a vague silhouette and a rough voice. Who is this man? I couldn't tell. I don't know him, I admitted, sinking onto the pillow and feeling completely exhausted. But my wife, she knows. Ask her. She knows him better than anyone. Detective Harmon stood up. His face was still expressionless, but I noticed the corners of his mouth tuck slightly, a sign that he was considering my information. He turned towards the door, clearly deciding to leave, but paused for a moment. "I'll ask her," he said, and the words sounded almost like a promise. He left the room, leaving me alone, leaving you with the thought that everything is just beginning. Not even a minute had passed before the nurse returned to the room. She was holding a syringe in her hands, and her face expressed concentration. She headed over to my Roman 4, getting busy with the procedure, and Detective Harmon came back behind me to continue the conversation. "Mr. Wilson," he began, interrupting my thoughts and diverting my attention from the nurse's actions, "I'm afraid I have bad news for you." I turned my head, and his words pierced me like red-hot iron. "When the paramedics entered your bedroom, the first thing they saw was your wife lying on the floor with a gun in her hand. She wasn't moving." Everything flashed in my head. I didn't want to hear what he said next, but I couldn't stop the flow of his words. Harmon continued without stopping. They, of course, were careful. One of the doctors even stepped on the gun, but she did not move. When he bent over her, there was no pulse. She was dead. I felt the air squeeze my chest, although it was almost impossible after everything I had already experienced. "My wife is dead? Was she dead?" I repeated in a whisper, not believing my ears. Harmon nodded. "Yes, it was like you beat her up and she shot at you." The words were stuck in my throat, and I, unable to utter a word, stared at the ceiling, as if that could somehow correct what I had just heard. "But we know it's not you," he added when he saw my shocked look. "You have no reason to worry about this. However, much remains unclear." My chest squeezed from pain, but not physical, but deep, internal, when the meaning of his words finally reached me. The wife was dead. Everything collapsed like a house made of cards. The nurse quietly injected something into the Roman 4, and consciousness slowly faded, plunging me into saving darkness. I woke up in a strange emptiness where my head was clear, but my body felt foreign. The surrounding silence resembled the silence of a grave, and only the sounds of medical devices disturbed it with their monotony. Memories of the last minutes before blackout slowly returned to me, like a slowly unwinding tape. There was a dull pain inside, but now it was not only physical pain, it was an awareness of loss. I looked down at my chest, feeling a familiar burning sensation. Detective Harmon's words came to mind. "Your wife is dead." These words were spinning around in my head like a scratched record stuck in one place. I tried to comprehend it, but even when the meaning became obvious, I was empty inside. No, this is not the emptiness that comes from the loss of a loved one. It was that cold emptiness that comes with shock, that moment when you realize your life will never be the same and you don't know how to accept it. The nurse entered the room quietly, as if not wanting to disturb my thoughts. I felt her presence before I saw her. It felt as if she had brought warmth with her, and this warmth broke the cold calm inside me. "How are you feeling?" Her voice was soft, but it didn't have the same professional calm. It was more personal, more sincere, as if she understood that I was already experiencing more than just physical pain. I looked around, my eyes accidentally catching the table next to the bed. It was filled with the usual things for a hospital: a glass, a dropper, several packages of medicine. And suddenly, I realized that I felt hungry. This fact seemed petty compared to everything I had just learned, but it forced me to focus on reality, if only for a moment. "I'm terribly hungry," I said, feeling like my words sounded unnatural. It was as if someone else was speaking for me. The nurse smiled slightly, her face softening. "We just have breakfast for you. We knew you'd be hungry when you woke up." She brought a tray of food. Hospital food is rarely something pleasant, but now I couldn't say that it seemed tasteless to me. I ate slowly, almost mechanically, but with every bite the food brought me back to life. It was like a grip on reality, necessary so as not to drown in the feeling of being lost. After I finished, I felt a little lighter inside. The pain was still there, but along with the food something more came back to me, a feeling of the need to move on, to understand what to do now. I looked at the call button and pressed it, calling the nurse again. This time, a specific question was spinning in my head. She appeared almost instantly, her face still retaining a caring expression, but now her eyes looked at me with a little more wariness, as if she was waiting for something important. Maybe she already knew what I was going to ask, but she didn't dare to be the first to say it. "My children," I asked, and my heart froze for a moment, waiting for an answer. "Your children are with your mother," the nurse answered, her voice as soft as a warm blanket. "They are at your house. Your mother calls often, but cannot come here. The children have been fine all this time. They are in good hands." God bless. Those two words flashed through my mind like a bright light in the middle of the darkness. My children were safe, and that was the first real ray of hope in this nightmare. Memories of them came flooding back to me. Grace, my 8-year-old daughter, with her golden curls and always curious eyes. And Jimmy, my 6-year-old son, who seemed to be the most serious and responsible boy I had ever met. How could I forget about them, even for a moment? I turned to the nurse again, feeling like everything was twisting inside. "Can you get me my cell phone? I need to talk to my mom." The nurse nodded and went to get the phone. Returning a couple of minutes later, she handed me the device, and with slightly trembling fingers, I dialed a familiar number. The conversation that awaited me was perhaps one of the most difficult in my life, but I had to carry it out. "Hi, Mom." My voice sounded weaker than I expected. From the other side, I heard a sigh of relief. Then my mother spoke. Her voice was full of concern, but it also conveyed the hidden strength that she always possessed. "Ralph, how are you? How are you feeling?" "Okay, Mom," I replied, although in fact that was far from the truth. "How are they, Grace and Jimmy?" Mom sighed, and a note of fatigue appeared in her voice. "These were difficult days. Both children are very worried, asking where their mom and dad are. I haven't told them anything about Doreen yet. I didn't know what to do. I clutched the phone tighter, fighting the guilt that washed over me. Mom, I understand. You don't have to go through this alone. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then she continued, I know, Ralph, but how can I tell them? They're so small, they won't understand. There is no right time to have this conversation, Mom, I said, feeling the pain of my loss resurfacing. But they need to hear it from me. As soon as I get home, I'll tell them everything myself. Mom was silent for a few seconds, then her voice became a little softer. I understand. But Ralph, are you yourself? How are you holding up? I knew that it was difficult for her, that she was willing to endure more pain than she should have. I'm holding on, Mom, I said, although the words were hard to come by. But right now, it's more important for me to know that the children are safe. She sighed again, her voice wavering as if she was about to say something serious. Your salary will be paid for a few more months, she said, as if by chance. It was Mr. Jordan who called and said that you have nothing to worry about yet. This is good, I muttered, feeling reality return step by step. Yes, no matter how hard it was, we had to think about the future, about what's next. Mom, maybe we can think about you moving in with us, well, with me. Ralph, this would be my biggest wish, but let's get you home first and then back to work. And then the future will take care of itself. My mother was a wise woman. Well, at least my kids were with Grandma and my income was stable. It could have been worse. I was conscious for only an hour. The food and short conversation exhausted me, and I fell asleep. When I woke up, I wanted to have lunch. He showed up pretty quickly. I felt better than in the morning. I began to adapt to the situation, pondering my next steps, when Detective Harmon reappeared on the threshold of the room. New questions awaited me. How are you today? He asked. Better. Today, I remembered that I have 2 children. I talked to my mother and began to remember my life, although I still don't fully control it. I want to find your wife's killer. I think you want this too. I'll be honest. Now it's important for me to achieve justice for the mother of my children who was taken from them. I lost my wife even earlier. What do you know about her lover? Or who was he there? About 2 weeks ago, I was mowing the lawn. I have a bottle rack on my mower. My bottle of beer was empty, and I stopped the mower, leaving the engine running so I could run to the kitchen for a new one. When I approached the house, I heard my wife talking on the phone. She was talking to her friend Susan Martin. The first thing I heard was, Susie, he's the best lover. It caught my attention. Did you know who she was talking about? No, and I still don't know. Why are you asking? Sorry, but I need to understand your point of view. It could be one of many lovers or someone you knew. I have to ask this question to fully understand what you are telling me. Understand. Until that moment, I had no idea that my wife had ever been unfaithful to me. And even now, I don't know whether she had one lover or more. All I know is that I turned off the mower when I heard what she said and went to her to find out. Oh, and how did that go? Well, that ended our marriage. I asked who he was, but she didn't say. Then I asked why. Her answer was that she gave in to the thrill. Her word was sinful. This sinfulness was so attractive that she could not resist. I asked how long this had been going on, and she said it only happened once. Then she looked at me and said that she only loved me and would try to stop everything. He'll try to stop, damn it. And what about you hitting her? A few nights later, on Tuesday, she came home. She looked so bad that if they hadn't stitched her up, she would have had a scar. I took her to the emergency room. We hardly spoke. Apparently, while she was getting stitches, she was questioned by a police officer. Yeah, she told the officer it was more like an accident than anything serious, that you would never hit her. But you hit her, you were full of remorse, and there was no way she was going to file a complaint against you. If the officer had insisted, she would have sworn that she simply collapsed in the shower. She was so cute, I said sarcastically. The officer practically repeated the same thing to me. He said that if I confirmed her story, he would not file a report. I told him she was lying, that I had never hit a woman in my life. Someone hit her before she got home. He shook his head and wrote down our conflicting versions. Did you want this recorded? I think yes. Then I thought, she's lying, and I want this to be recorded. Were you already planning to get a divorce then? I knew that sooner or later I would file for divorce, but I still tried to love her, and strangely enough, it seemed to me that she was also trying to love me. The next morning, she thanked me. She looked kind of thoughtful. She said that she hoped that she could get rid of this addiction, but she realized that it would take too much of her strength, and she knew it. I asked her why she said I hit her. Her answer amazed me. She thought she had messed things up so badly that I was going to file for divorce, and she would lose the kids. She wanted to create reasons in advance for keeping the children for herself. Wouldn't acting the right way help her better in this matter? Certainly, that's exactly what I told her. She replied that she hoped so too. But I could tell from the look on her face that bad behavior and lying were her priorities above honesty and compliance. Then, on Friday, I came home and she was gone. Well, I can talk to Susan Martin and find out what she knows. I may have additional questions. I was in the hospital for ages and was discharged before I was ready. I had to return home and take on the task that I had spared my mother, telling our two small children that only Daddy would be coming home. I thought about it constantly and prepared a plan. Whether he was any good remained to be seen. I walked into the house, and my mother was holding both of my beautiful children by the hands. They stood in front of her, and she pulled them close to her. She said I was injured and they should be careful. They were almost afraid to come and hug me. We all sat on the couch, hugged, kissed, and cried because so much time had passed. They told me everything about their world, everything that happened while I was away. It was a wonderful few minutes. Soon Grace asked when her mother would be coming home. I was ready. Sorry, but she won't come back. Mom did a very bad thing. She brought the man here who shot me. This is not what she wanted. She realized her mistake, but he killed her and shot me. Your mother paid too high a price for her mistake. Dad, aren't you sad? This is a difficult question. I'm sad. I loved your mother very much. But she brought this man to our house. He snuck up and shot me. She didn't want him to do it, but he did. So you see, I'm sad and angry at the same time. Do you understand this? Was Mom bad? No, don't ever think like that. She wasn't bad. She was your mother, and she was a wonderful mother. She just made a mistake. She did one bad thing, and it cost us all a lot. But we must learn to move on. Now she can't help us. I replayed it in my head so many times that I was able to hold on. They held up pretty well, too. The tears started, and I told them that it was okay to cry because it was a sad evening, but not destructive. We had context from the very beginning. It was good to love her, but bad to do the wrong things. Perhaps, if the death of a mother can be a lesson, then this was that case. We started a new life. It was wonderful to watch the children adapt. They did a much better job than I did. They supported me. Mom was great too. But at 67 years old, being a grandmother is one thing, but being a mother is completely different. I have many more responsibilities than before. In addition, I did not leave a feeling of anxiety. My wife's killer was never found. As I explained to the children what happened, I realized that she was a good person who found herself in a stupid situation and paid too high a price for it. Despite all her flaws, she deserved justice. But the only one who had ever seen this mysterious man was me, and I could not even give an accurate description, except that he was big. Months of physical therapy passed. I was in much better shape than before I got shot. My mother constantly insisted that I start dating women again, but I wasn't ready. I didn't trust women and didn't feel confident in myself. And what's the hurry? When she failed to persuade me to start a new relationship, she began to aggressively convince me to get rid of my wife's things. It was the topic of our nightly conversations after the kids went to sleep, until I finally got tired of it. Mother, leave it. I thought my new wife, if she showed up, Might want some of these things. Some of them she's never even worn. Son, if you think that some other woman would want to wear your late wife's clothes, then whatever brought you to this thought, you clearly didn't think about it. A woman who walks into your bedroom and sees it filled with a dead woman's belongings will run out of there faster than you can say it. Reluctantly, I admitted that she had a point. I was angry that my mother kept repeating that she raised me to be an idiot. We decided that our church could be used as a place to donate clothes. Some could be sold to parishioners, and some could be given to those in need. One Saturday afternoon, 5 or 6 women came with their husbands and cars. They began to dismantle the closet, chest of drawers, and collect everything they found. One of them came up to me with a jewelry box. "Looks like there's something valuable here. You might want to save this for your daughter. And here's this note." She handed me an envelope with my name on it. I put the note aside. We left the decorations, and everything else was collected and taken away in about 2 hours. I looked at the envelope. Something told me this was important. I called Detective Harmon. 5 months passed, and he barely remembered my name. But soon the memory returned. "I see no reason why you shouldn't open it. The killer couldn't leave her. Perhaps she wrote something that will be useful to us. Open it and read it to me." I did just that. "Dear Ralph, I hope you never see this letter. I hope when I get home I can burn it, and this will all be behind me. Donnie just called me. His name is Don Gardner. He lives at 14253 Three River Road here in town. I'm not going to talk much about him. I don't know that much myself. As I told you, we met by chance. Again, I won't go into detail, but I went to see him a second time. The fact that I came back must have been a sign to him that he wasn't rough enough the first time, and we ended up in the emergency room, as you know. Today is Friday. I took the children to your mother, saying that you and I were going on a date. But he called. He said he had something special for me, and if I didn't come to his house, I might forget about seeing him again. If I was smarter, I would have used this to get rid of him. But the mind has nothing to do with it. I'm furious and go to him. Just in case something goes wrong, I want you to find this letter and come for me, even if after this betrayal you don't want to leave me. Know that I love you with all my heart, and I can't even explain to myself why this behavior attracts me so much, but it does. My wish is that you never find out about this, and that we can return to our fairy tale marriage. You deserve it. Never think that you didn't do something, and that led to my irrational behavior. It's not your fault. It's all on my conscience. Hope to see you late tonight. Your loving wife, Doreen. Well, this is a serious case, Detective Harmon said, clearly agitated. Do you have a plastic bag you can put a letter in? I want it to be sealed so it doesn't get wet. This will help us catch this guy and put him behind bars. But so much time has passed. Yes, Mr. Wilson, it has passed, but there is every chance that this letter will lead us to arrest. I'll send someone out within the hour to pick him up, and we'll get a warrant and see what we can find out. A couple of days later, the detective called me. You won't believe the news I have for you. This sounds encouraging. I'm all ears. Last night, a group of 6 of us and I came to execute a search warrant at Mr. Gardner's home. He himself opened the door for us. He considers himself an intimidating, tough guy. He told me that I would not enter his house, that I had nothing on him. He said that to 6 police officers. Oh, further is even better. I told him we had enough on him for a judge to issue us a legal search warrant. He looked at me and said, I swear, she had a gun in her hand. What else do you need? I looked at my partner. This happens with us sometimes. People say things that incriminate them, and then you just need to continue the conversation. So I told my partner, he's right, we have nothing on him in this case. But I'm confused about the broken window issue. I interrupted. Which broken window? Exactly. This idiot replied. There were no broken windows. She got in using her key. We handcuffed him, took him to the station, and in the end, he confessed to everything. He actually had half a dozen guys, all of them already detained, who were going to rape her. She said no. He said it all got pretty rough. Suddenly, your wife just lost consciousness. For the first time since I came to the hospital, I was overwhelmed with grief. For a good person to die such a death is beyond comprehension. Grief quickly turned to rage. Her stupidity brought her problems to a quick end, but left me with too much to deal with. Anger quickly gave way to guilt. How can I think this way about the mother of my children? All these emotions and many more await me in the near future. I had no doubt about that. All 7 men were arraigned on charges of kidnapping, unlawful confinement, assault, and first-degree murder. Although the murder was not planned, it was committed during several criminal activities against my wife, and the law allowed for this charge to be brought. The prosecutor thought it was a bit of a stretch, but decided to give it a try. He secured convictions on all counts for all defendants. Their defense was that she came voluntarily and expected to be treated harshly. The death was a tragic accident. Her condition, the fact that they did not report what happened and instead tried to stage a murder, proved their intentions. All of them were given life sentences without the possibility of parole. You think justice will bring relief, but it doesn't. I agree that their defense was ridiculous, but it was somewhat true. She came to them voluntarily. Everything that happened later became possible only because of her first step. Life began to get better. Both children did well in school and with their therapy. The woman who worked with them was absolutely wonderful, in my biased opinion. For some time, it was difficult for Grace because my mother was not her mother, but she tried to be one. The therapist found a way to help Grace express her feelings and then brought my mother in for a session with both of them. She did the same with both children and with me when the question arose that I was not sad enough. I was surprised that my almost 10-year-old daughter and 7-year-old son worried that if I didn't let my sadness out, it would hurt me. Apparently, they were told that this was important for their health, and they simply transferred this logic to me. But I was impressed that they cared so much about me. It was a very difficult session for me. I had no hidden sadness, but I couldn't look at Jimmy and say, "I don't care if that bitch died, she deserved it." My son might think I have no empathy. I tried to evade their questions, choosing answers that were not lies, but also did not hint at the truth. I think I was relatively successful with the kids, but not so much with the therapist. As we were about to leave, she pulled me aside and said, "The truth is too painful for you to share with your children, but these things can create problems that we don't even know about. Would you like a private session?" I never thought I needed this, but this conversation was too difficult. "Yes, I do." We put it on the schedule. "You said you didn't think you needed therapy. Why do you think so?" "You really get straight to the point. I like it, Betty." "Oh, do you mind if I call you by your name?" "Not at all, Ralph. I think this makes discussing personal topics easier." So I asked why. Well, everything seemed simple to me. She had this strange passion, as I would call it, to receive rough sex and to be treated, in her words, as a woman of easy virtue. She did this twice, ended up in the emergency room once, and I told her if it happened again, I would get rid of her. Now I'm rid of it. She shook her head and looked at me. "Is this your version?" I didn't like her tone and question. "Wait, this is not a version. This is true. Ralph, these are facts, I agree. But this is not the whole truth. And you know it, and I know it. You said I'm getting to the point quickly, and I am. I'm not going to let you just say what you're comfortable with and move on. So your wife was killed, she left, and that's okay with you. I wanted to get rid of her, and I got rid of it. Is it true?" I tried to spit truth in her face, but the words got stuck in my throat. She was right. I wanted my wife to end up on the street, homeless and suffering for what she did. I didn't want her to be brutally killed. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel real loss. Tears flowed. "That's it. Everything is correct. Let it come out. Now we can start to sort things out." Sometimes I thought it was too easy, and sometimes it was too hard. I couldn't figure out why she did what she did, but only because the stupidity of her choices had robbed her of everything. I've learned that it's okay to feel terrible loss and hate it at the same time. Simple emotions were not suitable here. I quickly realized what was bothering my children. If I couldn't put it all together, how could they? The children began to behave better. We were making progress. Life was turning in our direction. The biggest problem now was that it was hard to live in a house with 3 generations trying to be 2. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the